The difficult part about doing a show is that there's never a good way to like start. Because I mean, like, do you say something about sports? Do I talk about like produce in like the grocery store or something? McLateral, if you have any suggestions, if you please, by all means.
I don't know. We've been live for like 10 seconds, so
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Lateral Show. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go.
Yeah, I'm jamming out to that. I love that.
There it is. Welcome into the Lateral Show, a sideways look at fantasy football, a proud part of the Fantasy Six Pack Network. Now, before we get any further into the show, I want to remind everybody that you can sign up for our premium plans over at fantasy6pack.net. I'm talking access to our award-winning rankings, DFS projections and stacking tools. We got a Discord community with all direct access to everybody. And I'm talking weekly AMAs with people like Joe Bond, and I don't know, maybe y'all do one at some point. Who knows? We'll have to see. Just betting, DFS, all other great content for members only. fantasy6pack.net/plans. So, we'll have it in the description. We'll talk about it later, do the whole thing. But now it's time for the show itself. My name is Herms. You can follow me on Twitter at HermsNFL. And I am joined, as always, by my co-host McLateral. Hello!
how's it going, people? Yeets and greets. 'Tis the season of the yeeting because, guys, we did it. Yeet is officially added to the Merriam-Webster dictionary.
Yeah!
We did it. All the yeets and greets. All the yeets. We did it, people. Mission accomplished. I'd have the banner behind me, but I lent it to my friend George a while back and haven't seen it since.
Happens to the best of us, man. I'm just so excited about that. So excited to be talking about our topic this week. We are going through the 3 big storylines that we are focusing on ahead of week 1 because we spent all summer and spring, putting together our own projections, rankings, doing whatever, kind of prognosticating as best we can. But there are a few things we're going to get a little bit more clarity on now that the season is finally here. And to do that with us, we got Justin Henry. What is up, my guy? Tell the people what you're all about, where they can find you, and what you do.
Yes, what's happening? Justin Henry. You can find me on the Fantasy Guys. I do some stuff for FanDuel. I'm probably going to be in your face on the Justin Henry show at some point. You guys will see me. I do a daily show. Had Herms on there, man. I talk fantasy. I talk NFL. I talk NBA. You name it. If you need help with your team, that's what I come do, man. I'm a fantasy guy for a reason. So looking forward to being on the show. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Dude, absolutely. I mean, this is what it's all about, man. This is absolutely what it is all about. So, like I said, the week 1 storylines we are keeping our eyes on. But McLateral, you had the thing that you wanted to talk about before we jumped into anything at all. So please just get whatever you have off your chest.
That was it. It was the fact that we got yeet into the dictionary.
Oh, shit, that's right.
I don't know what else needs to be discussed here, people.
That's fair. But now we
just end the show.
Do they put like phrases into the dictionary? Is it just singular words? Because yeets and greets, I don't tell you what,
yeets and greets gets in, unfortunately. Sus apparently also made it in. There's a whole list of things. Yeah.
I'm curious with that. There's always a sentence at the bottom that's use it in a sentence. What's the use it in a sentence for yeet? What's the use it in a sentence for sus?
I mean, I'm pretty hip with the use.
Bro was a little sus, so his girl yeeted his phone.
Hey,
two for one. The 2 for 1.
You got it in there. But so before we proceed, I just want to put this out there to all you six-packers out there, all you lateral heads. Let's work on getting yeets and greets into the Urban Dictionary. Yeets and greets challenge, hashtag. I don't know. Like, how serious are we about this? Not entirely sure. Probably not that serious at all. But if we could somehow pull it off, that would be wonderful. So there it is. Those are my thoughts, I suppose. I don't know. Transitions. What happened? Okay, into the week 1 storylines that we're going to be watching because I'm a professional. Like I said, spent all spring and summer thinking about things. Now we're going to finally see. Justin, we will start with you because you are our esteemed guest on this show. What's something you are definitely keeping your eye on as we roll into this first week of the season? Let's talk about it. We'll have a whole round table, do the thing. What's on your mind?
You know, one of the things I'm looking forward to, and the esteemed guest, please spare me the compliments. I don't need all that, man. I'm just like you, man.
Come on,
I'm here on your show, man. But when I talk about second year QBs, it tends to go in a whole lot of different directions. There's some people that think these second year QBs are going to outperform where they're supposed to go ADP wise or just in general in the NFL. And there's others who are expecting them not to live up to expectations. So there's a lot of second year QBs right now that are starting when we go over Trevor Lawrence. Talk about Zach Wilson. He's going to be out for a little bit, obviously. Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Mac Jones, Davis Mills. So there's a lot of starting options in the NFL right now that have had some ups, some downs. Are we going to see a breakout from Trey Lance like everybody's expecting? Are we going to see Trevor Lawrence take that next step as a quarterback? Are the struggles for Mac Jones real? So this week one is going to prove a lot about second-year quarterbacks. And to me, it doesn't necessarily validate any offseason takes. It doesn't validate if they're good or not for the year. I just want to see it from my eyes, especially since we got two of them going head-to-head.
That is so true. And, it's been a hot topic of conversation, whether it's redraft or dynasty managers out there. I mean, these quarterbacks, they're very talented. There's a reason that this class was so highly touted coming into the league. And so McLateral, I'll start with you, and then I'll throw it back down to you, Justin. Just if you had to pick the one you were most confident in and also the one you were most nervous about, just so that way we can kind of, just narrow it down a little bit, just for the sake, because we got like an hour to talk about some stuff. So let's just start there. I think that'd be fun. McLateral, start with you. Most confident, least confident.
So I think is it weird to say that I'm the most confident that Zach Wilson will be bad? I had to say that I'm really confident about something related to these second-year quarterbacks. I'm really confident he won't be good. If I had to bet on one of them being good, I suppose I'd put my money on Trevor Lawrence, even though I don't think he has this highest ceiling of the second-year quarterbacks, at least in terms of this year. I think that belongs to Trey Lance. I'm pretty confident that Justin Fields won't be particularly good and that it also won't be his fault. It's really not an indictment against him. It's more like Chicago's clearly in a rebuild year.
Oh, yeah.
They're not pretending to anyone they're not in a rebuild year. So, for me, I will basically take nothing about this season into next season when it comes to ranking Justin Fields. I fully expect to be on board with him. But Trey Lance is also weirdly the one I'm the most nervous about just because he's so raw. And so it's I believe in his talent. I believe he will get there eventually. I'm not 100% positive that it'll be this year, and I think there may be some growing pains even if it is. So he's the one that makes me the most nervous, not least of all because I'm a Niners fan. But ultimately, again, I actually think we're 4 hits from this draft class and then 1 bust of that top 5. And I don't expect that to actually change really this year.
Okay. I mean, I feel that for sure. And, so Justin, like I said, was going to pass it down to you. But, he brought it up. You're a fellow 49ers fan. So if you have anything to add about Trey Lance, go for it. And then just, give us your couple. Most confident, least confident.
Yeah. Well, just real quick on Trey Lance. There's not necessarily concerns, but you're right. He makes me nervous as a fan because I'm curious to see what this looks like. The expectations are there. I expect him to perform well. He has the perfect situation around him. Does he perform at that level? Does the Jimmy G stuff get in his head? I just want to see it. I think he's going to perform at an elite level, fantasy-wise and real-wise. So to me, I'm all about Trey Lance this year, but it does make me nervous as a fan because if it doesn't work out, the rails will come off. As far as most confident, I am most confident that, and you talk to this a lot, Justin Fields is not going to last in Chicago. And it's not necessarily the talent, it's the situation. When we're talking about Chicago, it's already a tough place to play because of the weather. The Windy City for a reason. It's tough for quarterbacks. We've never seen, you can't tell me the last time we've seen a top 10 fantasy quarterback in Chicago. Jay Cutler is the closest thing we've seen to a top 10 quarterback in Chicago in recent memory. So to me, I am out on Justin Fields in dynasty formats, in fantasy formats. I don't think it's a good fit. His upside is too capped. I think he's going to have to go to a different situation for us to see elevation out of Justin Fields. The one I'm least confident in is Trevor Lawrence. I think he has the projections of taking the next steps with Doug Peterson, with taking the next steps in this Jaguars offense. They're trying to put weapons around him. But for some reason, if he doesn't make that step this year, I would be very concerned as a fan. Like,
Yeah.
I would be very concerned as a fantasy manager if I had him in Dynasty. If Trevor Lawrence doesn't take a significant step here, what are you waiting on? So to me, I like to think that as somebody who's watched him and somebody who thought very highly of him coming into last year, as the number one pick, he has the talent. But as we've seen plenty of times, talent doesn't always produce. And so I want to see it from Trevor. I think he'll get there, but it makes me a little nervous.
And I gotta be honest, we've spent a lot of time on this podcast, like, even a little bit last week, and then also before we made our big video debut on Fantasy Six Pack YouTube, which, by the way, just real quick, if you want to hit like on this video, go ahead, do so, hit that subscribe button. That would be fabulous. Tell your friends, tell your mom, tell your dog, or if you have a cat or something, I don't know, you make guinea pig, we'll see. But we've spent a lot of time talking about the Jaguars, and we're very confident. We've mentioned time and time again throughout Doug Peterson's tenure as a head coach in Philadelphia. They ranked super high in pace of play and just overall stuff like that. Night and day difference from what we saw in the 1 year with Urban Meyer. But if this doesn't go well, to your point, so I'll ask you first and then I'll hand it over to you, McLateral. How many weeks do we give the Jaguars situation until we start to hit the panic button? Because we've been very high on ETN. We've been very it's just I'm so nervous. How long of a leash are you giving it?
To me, I think you got to give it 8 to 10 games. You're looking and it's like, okay, is this thing trending the right way? Because their schedule isn't going to be super difficult in that division, right? You're playing the Titans, you're playing the Colts, obviously, and the Texans. So there's not a whole lot of just stingent defenses. Maybe if you want to count Tennessee in there, and the Colts, they're up there, but they're not upper elite defenses. And when you mention the situation, if ETN doesn't pan out, Christian Kirk got paid and he doesn't pan out, if Evan Ingram continues to drop balls, at the end of the day, we could be looking at a situation where we're looking at this team and they're 2-6, 3-7. I would be very scared at that point if I was a Jaguars fan or if I had him on my dynasty team, because now that means they might be looking at a quarterback situation next year. They might be evaluating Trevor Lawrence instead of giving him the long leash. So I hope that's not the case. I want to see Trevor Lawrence shine, and he has all the tools to do it. But if we get to mid-season and this team is 3-7 or losing games they're not supposed to, or we see another streak like we did from Trevor Lawrence, where he throws 1 touchdown in 7 games again, there will be a lot of pause for concern and a lot of panicking fantasy managers.
Absolutely, 100%, man. And McLateral, you talked about last week in our debut YouTube episode, kind of the optimism that you had surrounding the Jaguars and addressing the question of how good do we think they are. And you said, well, we think they might actually be pretty good. So kind of flipping it on its head, what's kind of the doomsday scenario going off of what Justin said in your thought process around this team?
So my thing is that can it really get worse? Let's be honest here. Can it really get worse? I think the answer is no. Trevor Lawrence last year finished QB 22 with 12.71 points per game. So played a full season. Can it get much worse than that? I don't think it can get much worse than that. By the way, we talk about this quarterback class from that year. He was number 2 in terms of fantasy points for that quarterback class. Only Mac Jones finished better with 14 points per game and a total at QB 18. It was not great for these rookies, So I think it would be really easy to see him even jump up to QB 17, QB 16. And to me, that's a significant improvement. Last year's QB 16 was Russell Wilson with, only 14 games played. So he wasn't quite there in terms of points per game. But even Derek Carr, someone we talk of pretty well going into the season, QB 13, 15.94 points per game. To see Trevor Lawrence do basically 3 points better per game, I don't think is crazy, given that he's got a completely different offense to work with, both in terms of personnel and in terms of scheme. So I'm again, it just can't get worse. So I'm not that worried. I think, he needs to take a step forward for sure, but I think it would be almost impossible to take a step backward.
It's pretty fair. It's hard to go further back than probably
your coach literally kicked your kicker in the leg and didn't make it through an entire season. I don't think we necessarily grasp, despite how well we grasp it, what a disaster Jacksonville was last year. So when I say they could be pretty good, they could be pretty good and still finish with 7 wins, which would be nowhere near a playoff berth. But that's solid enough.
What if ETN Kirk Cousins, Evan Ingram. Just what if they're not enough? What if that's
Well,
similar?
Kirk Cousins probably not enough at wide receiver for Jacksonville, but Christian Kirk on the
Christian
other
Kirk,
hand.
excuse me.
Hey,
Excuse me, sorry about that. Getting these Kirks mixed up.
So again, like even if
many
they don't live up to our highest expectations, I think it's almost impossible to fall to the depths of last year. Like it was just that bad. And I think you only need to hit on a couple of things. Like if you hit on Travis Etienne, and then, maybe Christian Kirk doesn't pan out, but Zay Jones kind of does. Like, it's a mediocre division. Like the Colts, we think will be pretty good. The Titans were like, they could be a number 1 seed. They could change quarterbacks halfway through the year. We know the Houston Texans are going to be bad. So, I don't think it's necessarily the most difficult opportunity for them to take advantage of either. So, as you said, like how many games are you willing to give them? Like, I think in fairness, the answer has to be 17. Now, obviously, you're not going to start them all 17 of those weeks, but like, I don't see a universe that Travis Etienne won't at least stay on my bench, barring him not getting used at all and us being just totally wrong about his role in this offense.
I feel that.
I'm not as concerned about the efficiency. I'm more concerned about the raw numbers.
So
I want to see a lot of raw targets, a lot of raw rushing attempts. If they aren't doing so hot at first, that's okay. I want to see the potential being there.
If the Jaguars started out 2-8, you don't think that you wouldn't have any concern if you have him on your dynasty team. Trevor Lawrence is playing similar to what he played last year, maybe a little bit better, 2 points per game better. Would you have any concern? And
No.
You would have no concern still.
Not really. I mean, last year's
Fair.
just such a watch. Like it just is.
And plus, I mean, like at his level of prospect pedigree, like
Right.
these things don't happen all the time, but it may take a change of scenery for him to eventually blossom. We'll have to see how that works. But before I hand it back to you, Justin, for any of your final thoughts before we move on to our next topic, I do want to quickly just sprinkle in the hey, fun fact. So I'm the waiver wire guy over at Fantasy Six Pack this season. I'm going to have some really cool columns. There'll be some free stuff, but then there'll be some stuff behind the paywall. So one of the things that I'm kind of looking at, pre-week 1, because like I said, that's the whole point of the show. It's about to start. If you want to stash a guy, there's a small part of me that feels pretty good about the opportunity that Zay Jones received. Now, I'm not saying he has to see your starting lineup anytime soon. Obviously, that's the point of a stash. A pre-week 1 stash, that's what you do. Because if something pops off early, you already got him on your bench. So anybody, either one of you, I don't care who shouts it out first. I'm in on the just stash Zay Jones thing. What about either of you?
You need a
Depends.
deep enough bench.
Yeah. If your league's deep, I'm with it. But if it's not deep, I think there's other options out there.
All right, fair enough. So, Justin, any final thoughts you have on this second-year quarterback class?
Final thoughts on it is I'm excited for this class, and I really think we see Trevor Lawrence and Trey Lance shine this year. Those are the two I think that shine out of this class. And I brought up the Trevor Lawrence one because I didn't want to talk about Zach Wilson and Davis Mills. I just wanted to avoid it. I wanted to avoid that conversation. I didn't want to talk about Zach Wilson being out for 4 weeks because I think he's going to be terrible. And I think Davis Mills, he has a short leash there. I don't think it's going to be very long. I don't see him being a super productive. I think he's mediocre. He'll be there for another 2 years. So I was just saving y'all, sparing you guys the Zach Wilson and Davis Mills talk.
But I'm a huge Davis Mills stan. I love Davis Mills.
Hurts, pains me. It pains me. It pains me.
That's all good. And also, like, the fact that I'm a Davis Mills stan and the fact that nobody likes Zach Wilson on the show is very well established. So, if anything, I mean, you spared the listeners and the viewers a lot of stuff that we've already talked about. So,
Oh.
there you go. Heck
It's a
yeah.
win.
Absolutely. 100%. Yo, McLateral, dude. Okay, so you have a thing. You have the thing that you need to do.
I do have the thing.
What is your storyline that you are looking at ahead of week 1?
Guys, I think we need to consider the New Orleans Saints might be the team to beat in the NFC South this year. So the storyline is, will the New Orleans Saints be the team to beat in the NFC South this year? Let me paint the picture for you here. Added Tyrann Mathieu to defense, primarily held serve elsewhere, like a little bit of additions, a little bit of subtractions, but we expect this defense to be pretty good. That is a consensus opinion, both within the NFL community and within the fantasy community. The wide receivers are now Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry, and Michael Thomas instead of Marquez Callaway, Traquan Smith, and Deontay Hardy. And I almost replaced two of those names with Tweedledee and Tweedledum because that's what it felt like at times last year.
Fair enough.
Coaching. So lost to Sean Payton. People would be like, panic, panic, panic. So Dennis Allen was the defensive coordinator, and he'll still be there. I think it's Pete Carmichael was the
right.
offensive coordinator. He'll still be there. He's been the offensive coordinator since 2009.
Hey-o.
And then they added Doug Marrone as an offensive line coach, which, I don't want Doug Marrone head coaching my team necessarily, but as an O-line coach, sure. So we expect actually to be pretty stable, maybe even improve overall, despite the loss of arguably a Hall of Fame coach in Sean Payton. Let's not, get confused there. It's still a big piece to lose. I don't expect Dennis Allen, even if he succeeds, to have a career as good as Sean Payton's was, but could be good enough. Alvin Kamara suspension, unlikely. Now, let's get into the real piece, though. Jameis Winston. So Jameis Winston, who we all buried, basically, former Pro Bowler, rookie year, made the Pro Bowl, almost was Rookie of the Year. Last year, he was 5-2, 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 8.7 touchdown percentage, and an 8.2 yards per attempt. He was only QB 17 over that time, but that is largely because of low yardage. He was averaging less than 200 yards a game.
How did he do points per game, by the way? Just if you have that in front of you. I
so
apologize for
QB 17 is what I have in terms of point per game. I don't have the nominal figure.
Okay.
I got more of the relative rank.
Gotcha.
But I think having better wide receivers will improve that. And I'm going to get into why here in a second, because I want to talk about the other time that Jameis Winston balled out, which is 2019 when Bucks had Winston as the QB3. He was QB5 in terms of points per game. Chris Godwin was wide receiver 2, both overall and in terms of PPR points per game. He missed 2 games that year, by the way, and still finished that high. Mike Evans missed 3 games that year. He finished a little low in terms of overall finish, but in terms of PPR points per game, he was wide receiver 5. So we've got 2 top 5 wide receivers and a top 5 QB on that Bucs offense. Now, granted, Dennis Allen and there we go, Pete Carmichael. There's that name in that notes for you. Do not equal Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich. But Carmichael's been the Saints' offensive coordinator, as I mentioned, since 2009. He's produced 9 top 10 teams in terms of yards, 8 top 10 teams in terms of points over that time period, and he's historically produced good passing offenses unless his QB play dictates he should run the ball. Even then, his passing offense was top 12 outside the past 2 years in terms of overall production. There's no reason this team can't be a contender in terms of both fantasy football production and in terms of NFL offense. There is a lot to like here, and I think we're kind of sleeping on it. So I think they could end up being better than Tampa, who's frankly had a shaky offseason, and they're certainly better than Carolina and Atlanta.
Yeah. So, Justin, let me ask you this. What is it that you need to see from New Orleans in week 1 that captures your attention and says, well, I think McLateral has a point?
Well, I've been on the Saints train this entire offseason. I'm with you, McLateral. I 100% agree with you, and I think that Jameis coming in, being fully healed off the ACL injury is what I need to see week 1. They play Atlanta, and if they come through and they beat them by a touchdown or more, kind of dominate the game like we're expecting them to me that shows the Saints are for real. The schedule they open up with isn't very hard. It's not like there's a ton of teams on there that they should be scared of. So when I look at the Saints, as long as they get their win, they handle business against Atlanta. If Jameis looks sharp with these weapons, Michael Thomas on the outside looking healthy, we already know he's got a connection with Chris Olave, and Jarvis looked damn good in that preseason game too. I feel like this team is scary. We were all concerned about if Alvin Kamara was going to play. That has been shelved, supposedly been shelved till next season. The defense, like you mentioned, McLateral, is probably a top 5 defense in the league, straight up. So when I look at this team, there's a lot to be excited about with the Saints. Now, they do have the Buccaneers in that division, but as long as if they handle business against Atlanta effectively and decisively, I think the whole world's going to be talking about the Saints after week 1.
Yeah, man. And honestly, it's one of those things where the defense has always been pretty darn good. Even in the last few years of Drew Brees, maybe that had kind of hurt some of their, championship aspirations, because for the future Hall of Famer that he is, obviously his skills began to wane a little bit. And, last year, as referenced with the Jameis Winston, I mean, the ACL didn't really help, but the defense was always good. And even with trading away Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to the Eagles, which was something we've talked about on the show, I was very surprised by it, but they're still going to be pretty solid. They've invested a lot on that side of the ball. So I ask both of you, first Justin, then I'll hand it back to you, McLateral. If you're one of the people watching this or listening to this right now, and it's like, okay, well, I'm drafting after the Thursday night game. We're doing our draft this weekend, like right before Sunday kicks off. Who are a couple names on the Saints that you think probably could be really good draft day values? I'll start with mine. I won't go too far. Then I'll hand it to you, Justin. I just, Jarvis Landry is a name that came up a lot. I mean, short area targets, doing the whole thing. He's always been reliable. If you're playing in PPR, he goes super late. That's a piece of the New Orleans offense I think you can get value out of in your drafts. What about you?
Now, I look at Jameis Winston going at QB 17 in a lot of drafts. He's in that 15 to 20 range, wherever you're looking at your rankings. And to me, that screams upside. And McLeod talked about it. He was QB 17 points per game last year in those first 7 games. And the interceptions, everybody will talk about the 30 for 30 jokes. He only had 3 interceptions last year. That's it. So when we talk about the interceptions, it probably is going to be similar to his other years in his career when he was about 13 to 15 interceptions, which is fine for fantasy. If he can support Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry, we're not talking under 25 touchdowns with Jameis. Like, that's almost impossible, theoretically. So when I look at Jameis, he's a super value right now in super flex leagues. I'd be stoked to have him as my QB2 because there's an upside there for a whole lot more.
McLateral, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, it's Scott Fishbowl. He is my QB2. He's the one who's helping my team through the weeks where I don't have Deshaun Watson. You know what? It's okay. I only took Deshaun because he had fallen so far and deservedly so. So it was like, I've got Tua, I've got Jameis, I've got Deshaun. Like, if I can make it to when Deshaun comes back, I'm in good shape for the playoffs. I do love the Jameis Winston shout out there. I really do. And actually, like, we keep talking about the ACL. I think the real thing he recovered from is that LASIK, man.
Heyo!
Like, he has that LASIK surgery. All of a sudden, he is not throwing interceptions. So again, yeah, I do really like that, but it's got to be Chris Olave for me. I mean, he is my pick for Rookie of the Year on the offensive side of the ball. He is the best wide receiver in this draft class, in my opinion. And he's going as wide receiver 44 right now in PPR, average of 43.3. And like, I just want it. I want it everywhere I can get it. And Herms will tell you, I've got it almost everywhere I can get it. Like,
you have him on so many rosters.
Yes. So I am telling you, you need to draft Chris Olave. Like, he's going right now between Allen Lazard and Chase Claypool. I'd rather have him over either of those guys.
Yeah, I feel that, man. I feel that 100%. And then I guess, that kind of puts a nice bow on the topic. But obviously, I afforded the same benefit to Justin. So, McLateral, any final thoughts you have on the New Orleans Saints, but specifically because this is a week 1 look ahead, kind of similar to what I asked Justin, is there anything in particular week 1 that you're looking at that will kind of give you, like, I feel really good about this, or like, oh shit, maybe I got to think about this a little bit more?
So actually, like, Justin talking about beating the Falcons, I actually don't care if they beat the Falcons as long as it's close, and preferably on the higher scoring side of things. You got to remember the game's in Atlanta and it's a rivalry game. I think if it was in New Orleans, I would still be like freaking out a little, even if they lost in a close one. Because it's on the road in Atlanta, like, that is a rivalry game. As someone who lives in Atlanta, I can tell you there are plenty of billboards about this game. And there have been for a minute now. Like, so as long as, like, let's say they magically lost like 27-24. I'm still good with that. That's 3 touchdowns out of this offense. You got to assume that Jameis has probably got like 2 of those. Hopefully he doesn't throw many picks. And Atlanta just kind of plays out of their mind. Mariota looks good. They got Drake London and Kyle Pitts now. Like, they figure something out that we don't quite expect. Like, I'm okay with that. For me, it would be panic if, like, remember, I think they were the ones who did the blowing out. But remember that, like, Packers game to the start of
in
last
Jacksonville
season?
Because of the
Yeah, so it's like if something like that happens, then I'm panicking. Like, that's a little weird. And luckily, like, it didn't matter in that instance. Like, Green Bay got their stuff together or whatever. But it's like, if we're talking like a 40 something to like single digits, then yeah, then I'm like worried a little. But again, I think this team is going to perform well. I think there are too many good pieces in place there for them to not have long-term success over the course of the year.
I feel that for sure. And just real quickly, I'll throw out my thing that I'm looking for. I just want to see if Michael Thomas does his thing, because if Michael Thomas does his thing, that takes this offense to a whole nother level. Also, just real quick, Joe, if you're watching, boss over here at Fantasy Six Pack, I wonder if we could get Fantasy Six Pack to comp you for a ticket to attend this game. Just for the sake of like live reporting the game. I mean, it would only be fair as fantasy football analyst to send one of our guys out there in real time. You're already in the city. We'll have to talk to Joe about that. So we'll see. Hey, talk to us. Hit us up. My big thing that I am looking at as we transition into the regular season, looking ahead at week 1, I really, really want to see what this Packers backfield is all about, because we've spent so much time on this show in the past talking about what's going to happen with the wide receivers, talking about Allen Lazard ad nauseum, talking about these rookies ad nauseum. And we've kind of jokingly, but also very seriously, at the end of those conversations, always pivoted to, well, Aaron Jones is the guy that you want if you're looking for the pass catcher. Because we kind of just assume, logically, based off of everything that's going on in the offense, that it's going to run through the backfield. So what I'm really fascinated to see is how much is that going to be true week 1? Because there's a few different scenarios that could really play out here. This could just be a heavy Aaron Jones thing, and A.J. Dillon sees a same amount of the work that he kind of saw last year, which was, albeit fantasy viable, but not nearly as viable as I think we were kind of hoping for. For me, personally, in my draft rankings, if I remember correctly, I think my RB 18. I know you've drafted him a bunch of places. I know I've drafted him a bunch of places. I think we both share him in common on our Scott Fishbowl rosters, and it could be a true... And I've talked about, I think it was a year ago last time I brought this up. I hate the fact that we fall back on the Ingram Kamara thing because it's such a hard duo to ever replicate. But it's an easy thing to reference from, just a historical reference. Why not? Whatever. That will kind of give us a big indication. So, if that's the case and they just go full Aaron Jones, then, maybe the Dillon thing was a little overblown. And then on the flip side of this, what if they do give A.J. Dillon a bunch of the responsibility, but Aaron Jones doesn't figure into the passing game nearly as much as we were hoping? In that case, it kind of just the gap between the two closes a bunch, and then it's going to be a question of week to week. Well, gosh, are we really going to have to sit here and figure out which one of these guys is going to do the thing? So honestly, that is what I am most interested in looking at. And also, just frankly, I'm just worried about it, because obviously we can be optimistic and do the Kamara Ingram thing as I referenced. But what if it doesn't work, Justin? Please, just tell me, what if it doesn't work?
I'm trying to find a situation where it doesn't work. I think with Devontae Adams leaving, it just opens up so many targets, and everybody's assuming that Allen Lazard and Christian Watson, Sammy Watkins, these guys, they're not as proven, and I think Allen Lazard has a true opportunity to come in there. Romeo Doubs, obviously, but I think Allen Lazard has an opportunity to come in there and be a 1. But I think it's really going to be Aaron Jones. We've seen him lean into Aaron Jones when Devontae Adams has been out, and that's probably going to be the case for a majority of these games. I think A.J. Dillon's going to get a lot more of the groundwork. He's been trusted. We saw that last year when Aaron Jones got hurt. So there's a lot more trust there with Aaron Jones, and I think with A.J. Dillon, and I think Aaron Jones is also going to be a bigger factor in the receiving game. There's a player a lot of people are hype on this year is DeAndre Swift, and I'm like, if you're hype on DeAndre Swift, why aren't you the exact same hype for Aaron Jones? Because that opportunity is still there. So to me, I look at Aaron Jones, I don't really see a way this fails because Aaron Rodgers leans into Aaron Jones so heavily. And we saw so much success with A.J. Dillon in the red zone and in the run game. I don't see how that can't be a part of the game plan moving forward for the Packers.
I feel that. Confidence meter 1 through 10. 1 being, oh, there's no way. 10 being, oh, yeah, this is definitely going to work. I think I know what your answer is, but just to put an arbitrary number on it, 1 through 10 confidence.
9.7.
All right, okay, so that's pretty high. Fractions of a point from being completely 100% confident. So, Mick Lateral, I will hand it over to you. If you want to play devil's advocate, That could be kind of fun, but I'm not going to tell you where to roll with it because it's your part of the show. It's your part of the conversation. Do what you got to do.
So, as mentioned, Aaron Jones had some injury issues, last year. So you can take what I'm going to say with a little bit of grain of salt on that front. But also, AJ Dillon was the 5th highest graded running back, according to PFF, which isn't nothing. Take that as you will as well. Here's something it really can't be disputed. From week 9 until week 18, AJ Dillon was the running back 12 in PPR. He averaged 14.6 points per game over the course of 9 games. Aaron Jones, by comparison, averaged 12.3 points per game over the course of 7 games and was RB 29. Again, missed 2 games during that time period due to injury, but still less points per game. Like a whole 2 less points per game. And if you look at it, we talk about like Aaron Jones' target machine. And yes, he got plenty of targets, but he had weeks where he only got 2 targets, where he only got 1 target. And AJ Dillon, we talk about him not being a target monster, but he only had 3 games where he didn't get at least 2 targets, which considering he also only had 3 games, and this is from week 9 on, what I'm looking at, where he didn't get double-digit rushing attempts. So, pretty good. I think there's a lot to show that they like what AJ Dillon is doing. And given AJ Dillon's age, where he is in his contract versus Aaron Jones' age and where he is in his contract, I see them only giving more work to AJ Dillon, not less. Even if they do like Aaron Jones, which they do. So for me, it's just like we have kind of seen where this has gone. Since week 9 of last year, it's actually been AJ Dillon's backfield. Not by a ton, but it's been his backfield. Aaron Jones has been the complimentary back. Admittedly, a huge compliment, but the complimentary back of the two.
And I feel that, and that kind of leads me into, I guess, some of my closing thoughts, and then I'll turn it back to each of you for kind of your thoughts about this. When we look at fantasy drafts on a yearly basis, especially, just going through and looking at, the hit rate at, certain points in the draft, we also talk about the RB dead zone a lot. Round 2 is not technically part of the dead zone, but I mean, I guess it kind of could be, because what is it traditionally? I would guess we would say like round 3 to round 8 or so. So like Aaron Jones being a 2nd round running back pick on average anyway, like the return on that investment is not always super high. The hit rate in that range is not particularly great. Whereas where AJ Dillon is going and everything that we've been kind of talking about kind of leads me to suggest that, again, for people out there who have not drafted already that are either watching or listening to this, hey, I'm drafting this weekend before week 1. What do I do? My thing, and again, I'll ask each of you, if I had to pick one of the two to recommend at cost, like, I mean, even in PPR with everything, especially that you just discussed last year with what they were doing down the stretch there, I think it just has to be AJ Dillon. So if we're picking somebody we are most confident in between the two, I'm starting to get like a little cold feet. Not saying both can't be good, but just saying, I'm probably going with AJ Dillon. McLateral, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, forget about at cost. I almost recommend AJ Dillon overall. I have Aaron Jones currently at RB16, AJ Dillon at RB18. Like, the only thing separating them is Saquon Barkley. The only reason I give Aaron Jones a slight edge is simply past production. Like, we've seen him do it. We've seen him do it more than once. You can't fully write that off. But, like, he's 27, approaching 28. AJ Dillon's 24. AJ Dillon has the higher draft pedigree, the better college pedigree. You would argue the better measurables physically. And again, since week 9, he was the better performing NFL running back. So, while again, yes, Aaron Jones had some injuries to deal with. And yes, will Aaron Rodgers trust him more as a pass catcher of the two? Probably. Matt LaFleur clearly trusts AJ Dillon in this offense. And that's not going away. And that's going to dictate who is on the field. I think AJ Dillon's going to be on the field a lot. So given that their ADPs right now are RB10 for Aaron Jones and RB26 for AJ Dillon, again, for reference, last year, weeks 9 to 18, AJ Dillon was RB12 and Aaron Jones was RB29. So almost the reverse of that. Like, it's AJ Dillon easily for me.
Yeah, and when I hear you, and to me, I also recognize when players are hurt, it does affect their points per game, and I think that's
Sure.
what we have to factor in with Aaron Jones. When we look at it, he was hobbled up, and I want to say one or two of those games where he didn't even play his normal amount of snaps. So when I look at Aaron Jones, even at the value right now, you're getting him as a mid-second round pick, and I think we've seen Aaron Jones have multiple top 10 finishes in his career. To me, I think you're getting a lot of value in the second round with him. And AJ Dillon right now is going in the round 5. Like, you're having to reach on AJ Dillon in drafts because he is a hot commodity. People are talking about him, and they're expecting him to take over the role similar to Tony Pollard in Dallas. When I look at Aaron Jones, I think that he has more upside this year with the receiving yards. It's natural. It's going to happen. I think there's a lot of open targets there. And when you talk about contracts too, this team just paid Aaron Jones to be their guy for 4 years. And contracts matter in fantasy football. So to me, that he's going to get a solid workload. I think AJ Dillon will be solid, but I'd rather have Aaron Jones. I'm a studs guy though. I like my studs, and so I'm going with Aaron Jones.
I got good news and I got bad news, listeners. I'll start with the bad news. The bad news is I'm not any more sure of this backfield than I was coming into this because you both made such compelling arguments. But the good news is I was right to bring it up as my thing that I'm watching. And also, we got 2 really good cases from each of these individuals on this show. So if you're still drafting this weekend, the choice is yours. And, hey, it's a good thing to choose from. It's a good thing to choose from because regardless of all the kind of panicky nature that's going on in my head, there's a reason we're talking about it. There's a lot of opportunity to be had here. So, hey, whatever works. I hope it works out for both of them, but we'll just have to see. And that's the beauty of playing fantasy football. Those are the things that we are definitely looking at ahead of week 1 in terms of storylines. Boom, that's the 3. Moving on to the next part of the show, because in case you haven't heard, if you're into DFS, but you're not doing the whole setting a lineup with the whole points thing, you have to those websites with the lineup simulators and the whole thing. I mean, I don't have the money to pay for that. That sounds too complicated. I barely even understand it. What if I told you could play daily fantasy and set a whole daily fantasy lineup, but just do it based off of prop bets and prop picks? Because those are a lot more fun. You have a lot more control to some degree over the outcome of that, because simple research, doing your thing, you can do that over at Thrive Fantasy. Hey-o! Yes, it's a super fun way to play daily fantasy. And if you sign up as a first-time user with the promo code HERMS, you'll get a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. Kablam! So, the big tournament. It's the $250K whole thing, $50,000 to the winner. I've got an article coming out very soon about 3 of my favorite picks for your lineup. I'm only going to tell you about one of them because if I give you all 3, what's the point in clicking on the article? So, you were just going to go ahead. I'm going to do that real quick. And I'm going to start by telling you about Cincinnati Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow. He has an over-under of 292.5 passing yards. So he's played 3 career games against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He has surpassed a total of 200 yards in those games only once. That was in his rookie season with a total of 213 yards. Smashing the under on this prop gives you a greater point total in the big tournament. And you kind of have to go big or go home. That's what it's all about. Even if you get certain stuff wrong, if you try and maximize the amount of possible points that you can get in these Thrive Fantasy tournaments, you're going to it's going to be gangbusters. I'm telling you, it's going to be a good time. And sure, the Bengals offensive line is going to be so much better than it was last year. They spent a lot of money investing in that line. Joe Burrow himself will have more time in the pocket to throw and do his thing. But he had Jamar Chase and T. Higgins last year, and he didn't go over 200 yards in either of those games. So there's still a chance that Joe Burrow can have a really good game here and not go over that total. In one of those starts last year, he was still under that yardage threshold, and he threw 3 touchdowns. So I'm not saying, hey, Joe Burrow's going to be a bust week 1. That's not my point. But I think it's a pretty lofty line to set in what's going to be a rivalry game. And I can tell you, just as a Steelers fan who has always really disliked the Bengals, these games are brutal. They are bruising matches, and there's a lot of running that goes on. It's the AFC North, man. It's a ground and pound type division. So, for me, if you're going to go for it, My final verdict is taking the under on the 292 and a half passing yards. That will earn you 105 points if it hits in your Thrive Fantasy lineup. That's for the contest. McLateral, I know you have some prop bets for people participating in the prop lobby that you would like to talk about.
Yep. So for the Thrive Fantasy prop lobby, I believe you can pick anywhere from 2 to 5 props. See if you stack them together, get that payout. So I've got 3 for you here today. First one, what Herm said. So the number's a little different for the prop lobby. It's under 257.5 passing yards versus Steelers. Again, Burrow has literally never thrown for more than 215 passing yards versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Cannot stress that enough. That is just such a smash. Okay, what else? We've got Austin Eckler over 35.5 receiving yards versus the Las Vegas Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders defense, it's fine. It could even be decent, but it's nothing like elite by any means. Austin Eckler last year, over 16 games, he missed 1 game, 40.44 receiving yards. So law of averages almost dictates, because I don't expect the receiving work to really go down for Eckler. I think his rushing work may go down, but like the receiving is what he does at an elite level. That's why he is so special to his team. 40.44 receiving yards. Like he basically averaged almost 5 yards more than this a game last year. So to me, that's a pretty easy one to hit. One that's a little trickier, and my last one here, Patrick Mahomes under 295.5 passing yards versus the Arizona Cardinals. Yes, it's Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, the Cardinals were really good last year on defense. I don't know if they'll be quite as good this year. But here's the thing. Mahomes actually was under this threshold of 295.5 passing yards in 12 of 17 games last year. So on average, he failed to hit this number. We've heard talk about Kansas City wanting to run the ball a little more, despite the fact that they arguably have never had worse running backs. But that's a whole separate thing. If Andy Reid wants to run the ball, he can run the ball. I ain't going to stop him. So it's not my favorite, but given what is out there, I think it does have a really strong chance to hit. And so that's why I'm recommending it.
I hear you 100%, man. And, just as a reminder to viewers and listeners, Thrive Fantasy gives out the highest payouts in all of their parlays of any of these platforms in the industry. So once again, if you sign up for the first time using promo code HERMS, that's my name, 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. Use promo code HERMS on Thrive Fantasy. Prop up. It says it on the back of my shirt, but I can't turn around. It says that, I promise. I swear to God it does. It's the whole thing. It's the hashtag that you use. Okay, so that is our little Thrive Fantasy Corner. I guess before we get into the last segment of the show, Justin, do you have anything anything about that just for funsies?
No, I really love that Burrow prop, because I think the Steelers are coming in a little underrated this year. I think everybody's expecting them to be terrible, which I don't think they're going to be great, but it's the Steelers. It's Mike Tomlin. And they're going to keep that defense hot, and I know they're going to cause fits. It's a division game. I really love that Burrow play, so shout out to you guys for mentioning that.
And thank you so much for being so nice about my Steelers. It's a great way to my heart. I mean, it really is.
I'm just being real. I think a lot of people are fading the Steelers, and it's like they have all these offensive weapons outside of the quarterback position. The defense is still top 10, so why are we fading them so hard? I think the number for the game is 6.5 too. So to me, I love the Steelers, and I think that there's even a potential that I could see a world where they win the game week 1. So I'm not going all in on the Burrow. We said it's 290. That's a lot of yards in a tough division game. So good call, guys.
There you go. 100%. Oh, yes. I would say the thing about the promo code again, but I already said it twice, and third time would be a charm, but maybe a little bit too far. So I don't want to push things too far, because at that point, the bit itself could bust. And it would just be an absolutely horrible time, and nobody wants that, because we really want all of these things to boom and be super big, wow, type surprises, which leads us into, look at me, I'm a professional, our boom bust picks for week 1. We talked a little bit about it before the show. Justin, if you had time to prepare, absolutely wonderful, but just in case, I'll go with McLateral first. But to describe what it is that this segment is about, readers who remember www.thelateralff.com, every week, what we would do between the two of us is go through the Fantasy Bros projected points for any given week. In terms of our boom picks, we would go for players outside of the top 12 in PPR typically that we would expect to just go nuts and greatly surpass what they were projected for. And then for the bust picks, not necessarily saying like, oh, they're going to fall off the face of the earth, don't start them in your lineup, but some players in the top 12 that maybe underperform expectations a little bit. So that's what we're going to do here in our version of the lateral boom bust. McLateral, I will start with you. Let's start with the good news. Let's start with the good news. Who do you expect to boom based off of those projections?
Well, so we've actually already talked about him a couple of times tonight, and that's Trevor Lawrence, the quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars, currently projected to be quarterback 17 according to Fantasy Pros current rankings. Again, that's where I'm pulling this number from, as Herms already discussed. 16.7 projected points. There's a couple different places where you can get the projected points from. Again, I'm pulling them from that rankings page. And Jacksonville should be better this year, as we've already talked about. Lawrence should take an overall step forward this year, as we've already talked about. But also the Washington Commanders are a fucking mess.
Yes.
Let's be real. They
Ain't
are
that the truth?
terrible.
Oh, boy.
They're an embarrassment to the league. They're an embarrassment to the city I used to call home. They are awful. They are no good. They are a very bad day. But seriously, they could be objectively bad. Like, not only are they a mess, because they are a mess, and some of it's not their fault. Like, their running back just got shot in the leg. Like, not a whole lot you can do about that. Like, that is genuinely unfortunate. On the other hand, they were a mess before that. And again, we want to talk about being bad. The best team matchup-wise for opposing quarterbacks last year was the Washington football team, now the Washington Commanders. They gave up nearly 2 fantasy points more, according to Pro Football Reference, per game than the next closest, the Atlanta Falcons. Like, this was a truly abysmal defense, and I don't think it's going to get a ton better, at least not right away. I think Chase Young will eventually get integrated fully into this defense again, and at that point, maybe things will get better. Maybe when Brian Robinson comes and the team gels a little bit more, the defense will gel a little bit more with it. But I think for these first couple of weeks, it could be truly awful. And so you might as well take advantage of Trevor Lawrence right now, especially if you're someone that's streaming your QBs this early because you got someone stashed down the line. Like, he's probably available in your league. He's not going too far from the QB 17 that he's rated in week 1. Like, you go ahead, pick him up, see what happens. I think he's going to hit.
Yeah. And, honestly, kind of like I said before, I teased it way earlier in the show. My, weekend kind of pre-week 1 waiver stashes that I'm going to talk about. Actually, I'm not even going to call it a non-zero chance. There is a huge chance that I'm going to list. If you still need a quarterback, Trevor Lawrence is going to be somebody that definitely appears in that article. So when you see it, don't be shocked because A, I literally told you, and B, it kind of should be just abundantly obvious based off of everything my man just said. Although I will say, I think the secondary is a little better than you give it credit for, but I still agree with your overall point. Justin, yes, sorry.
Fantasy Pros does still have the matchup rate as a 9.4 out of 10. Like, it's tough to get better than this.
And that's fair. That's totally fair. So Justin, if you have your boom pick prepared, I would love to hear what you have to say.
My boom pick is going to be playing in the game against Chicago and against the Arizona Cardinals. Yeah. And I'm going with Mecole Hardman right now.
Ooh, yeah.
Mecole Hardman. This is a little reach in the bag because everybody's expecting Juju Smith-Schuster to be the guy. Travis Kelce's going to play. Mecole right now is projected for 9.7 points, 3 catches, 43 yards, no touchdowns. I think he has something to prove, and I think he's going to bring more to the table than other people think. Now, he said that he wants to hit 1,000 yards. And in order to do that, he's going to have a lot more than 43 yards in the game or whatever his total was. To me, I'm all in on him this week. I think that he breaks that. I think he sees a touchdown. I think he gets heavily involved in this offense. Go Mecole week 1. Boom play, baby.
I mean, hey, look, the dude's got all the speed in the world.
I gotta go in my bag for that one, man.
Of course, and that's what it's all about. Because whether it's just your deeper redraft leagues out there, your deeper dynasty leagues where you look at it and you're just like, oh, who do I have on my bench? Ugh, okay, well, Mecole Hardman's there. Or, hey, look, DFS, man. DFS, it's a good pick. It's a good pick. I'm definitely here for it. Now, let's kind of go over a little bit into the negatives because, that's literally how boom bust works, So I will hand it back to you, McLateral. Who is your bust pick for this exercise?
So you're not going to like this one.
Oh.
I've got Darren Waller, tight end for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Oh, come on.
He's projected currently as tight end 5, 11 projected PPR points. The Los Angeles Chargers are a potentially tough matchup. Now, we just talked about that last year, points against. And last year, oddly enough, the Chargers were the best fantasy matchup for opposing tight ends. However, I think that the Chargers have done a lot to improve their defense over the offseason in a way that Washington has not. For example, Washington certainly didn't add a Khalil Mack to their offense, to their defense rather. So like that, that's not nothing. And on the side of the offense, this team has added Devonta Adams. And Devonta Adams just isn't going to be a preferred target for the coach, which I think he will be. He's genuinely the preferred target for this quarterback. Like this quarterback is the reason Devonta Adams is in Las Vegas and not in Green Bay. He's certainly the reason he's in Las Vegas and not elsewhere if he was going to leave Green Bay. I mean, they have a relationship that goes back to college that is very strong, and I expect it to play out onto the field. So now Darren Waller is competing with Hunter Renfrow for targets, and that's not really a position he's been in so far in his career. So I'm expecting him to fall a little short. Fantasy Pros rates this matchup as a 3.6 out of 10, which is about as bad as it gets for tight ends this week. So again, I get it. We've really liked Darren Waller in the past, but I think this week we start to see why this year, not the pick he used to be. And it's not a ton his fault. It really is that addition of Devonta Adams is going to be a big difference.
I feel you. And on a week-to-week basis, it may be a little bit more difficult, especially because you name Devonta Adams, but also let's not forget, people, Hunter Renfrow still exists. And in a Josh McDaniels offense, that slot receiver has always been a pretty integral part. And before we hand it over to Justin, just got to say, I know you mistakenly said Khalil Mack on offense, but imagine him as a fullback, like blocking people. I mean, just like, dude, I mean, come on. Like,
I mean, honestly, even like Trent Williams lineman, like, I bet he could move.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I don't hate this idea. I don't hate this idea. Justin, who do you have as your bust pick for this exercise?
We couldn't. I think we can go this whole show and not talk about the Thursday night game. Josh Allen, man, everybody's got him pegged for this revenge tour. And I don't know if he puts up the same fantasy points that we're looking for. That's a tough matchup on the outside there. Stephon Diggs, Jalen Ramsey. And Gabe Davis, I know everybody loves him, and he's going to be a Pro Bowl, Hall of Fame, All-Pro, whatever you call it. I think we can see some first-game jitters out of both teams. I think the defenses are both going to come to play. It's going to be more of a battle than people thinking with Von Miller on the other side there for the Bills. I could just see this being like a defensive, intense matchup. The over-under set at like 51, 52. So I think that it'll even be under for the matchup. Give me the under with Josh Allen. I just don't see him performing at a super high level. I can see this being a lower scoring game than people think.
I actually love this because, well, the analysis, spot on, flawless. And then also, I promised our bosses before the end of the show, we would do some sort of Thursday Night Football preview for week 1. So this was
ready, baby.
This was a great segue. Justin, you were the man. Okay, so to kind of close us out for the show before we get into our outros, I'll hand it back to you again at the end. We'll go around just for additional thoughts. But you kicked it off really well. McLateral, you first, then I'll kind of sprinkle in my thoughts. Just some things you're looking at for the Thursday night matchup between the Buffalo Bills and the Los Angeles Rams to kick off the 2022 season. Now, mind you, the only thing I really have to announce that I can announce, the only thing that really comes to my mind is just like a thing that I can mention that I remember is that Van Jefferson's not playing. That's about all I got. So, McLateral.
Who is playing? And this is the only thing I'm paying attention to, not least of all because he is on the team in our league of record. Dawson Knox got paid.
He did.
Dawson Knox
has
signed a 4-year contract extension. He will be in the top 5 in terms of highest paid tight ends in the league. I got him as tight end 12 in our draft, which I thought was solid value. And I'm pretty excited now. Let's go. You're not going to pay this guy if you're not going to throw the ball to him. And I think while Gabe Davis has shown a lot, and I am higher on him than I ever thought I would be, there's still some question marks. There's still some red flags. They seem determined not to utilize him to his full potential. And here we go. They signed Dawson Knox to a multi-year extension. I am very much paying attention to this tomorrow night.
Okay, pick a winner though, because I'm gonna make everybody pick a winner because I don't know. It seems like a podcast thing to do. So pick a winner.
I think I bet on the Rams. We got like this pick pool thing for fantasy six pack.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I picked the Rams.
All right.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, this is in Los Angeles.
It
Like
is.
that's been the other thing to me with this game. It's like this is a home game for the defending Super Bowl champions, and we're just acting like Josh Allen's gonna swagger in there
Man.
with his like massive python and just throw the thing all over the place.
I love it.
Oh,
Uh,
I mean,
yes, give me the Rams. I'm putting my marker down on that one.
All right.
okay.
So I think the one thing I'm looking for in this game, and it's been talked about, but I don't think it's been hyped up outside of like maybe a Twitter fantasy community.
Yeah.
Cam Akers in his return from this Achilles. Now, is this Cam Akers fully healthy? Are we getting a different version? We've never really seen a running back come back from an Achilles injury and be productive. Cam Akers has a draft capital. He has the talent you want to see. He's got the youth on his side. Can he bounce back? We've never seen anybody recover that quickly as well from an Achilles injury to go and play in the playoffs, not efficiently, but against some tough defenses. Do the Rams use him and give him 15, 20 carries a game? Or are they going to pull back and use him in a split with Darrell Henderson? I'm curious to see how Cam Akers plays in this game. That's because the Bills have the pass rush. They're not necessarily the best at stopping the run. I want to see if he can do some damage against the Bills. It'll change a lot of the narratives that went on about Cam Akers over these last few weeks.
I'm with that 100%, and it transitions flawlessly into something that, unfortunately, I just won't be able to write about for my pre-week one waiver stashes because it's a Thursday night football game. I can't tell you to pick somebody up who's going to be locked after the Thursday night game. So we've seen a lot of the Cam Akers, not only did he look kind of dreadful, coming back from the Achilles, but then people say, it was tough run defenses and whatnot. But I pointed out in past episodes, even before the Achilles injury, before he came back and faced some tough run defenses, the sample size we were extrapolating for him to be this otherworldly breakout was a very small one anyway.
That's true.
So that already had me nervous. And then I've talked about Darrell Henderson the whole offseason. I've written about it over at Fantasy Pros. I've talked about it on the show. I've talked about it on other people's show. I've drafted him a whole bunch. There's a good chance that workload ends up being a lot more split, and he's a super good value. But both players were held out of training camp for different injuries for a super long time. Cam Akers, the one we kind of know about, and then Darrell Henderson, I forget because I don't know, I didn't prepare enough to talk about that. But here's the thing. I hate to say it because it feels like – actually, no, I don't. Because if you're in a 10 or 12 team league, you can ignore this potentially. But deeper leagues out there, especially Scott Fishbowl, okay, if you're in Scott Fishbowl and, because the waivers already ran. So, at this point, everybody's just a free ad drop. Kyren Williams. Yeah, it's kind of weird to recommend out there, but if you look at that backfield, look at that depth chart, if neither of them are good to go in that high-powered of an offense, what's better than that for something cheap that if it works, you're great, and if it doesn't, you just let him go and throw him back out there because that's the beauty of the waiver wire anyway, baby.
We saw Sony Michel last year.
Exactly. And now that he'll be in the same stadium, but on a different team suiting up with the Chargers. So it's just hey, it's really potentially Kyren Williams. So that's something that even if you don't pick him up and stash him, that's fine. At least I know on ESPN, they have the whole thing where you can click the button and it says interested. You hit the flag button and interested. At least keep an eye potentially on how that works out. I think that kind of wraps up not only the Thursday night preview thing that we did, but also this episode of The Lateral Show. A sideways look at fantasy football, a fantasy six-pack production. I am super happy that we were able to get everybody adequately prepared for things to look at, had some Thrive prize picks, some boom bust calls, and just some fun stuff in general. And I did the kazoo a few times, which is always fun and the hallmark of the show. And if you want to just go ahead, once again, like this video, hit the subscribe button on the YouTube. That would be fabulous. If you want to find the the podcast version of this show, look for The Lateral Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever Anchor puts it. I don't know. Just look for it. The Lateral Show, a sideways look at fantasy football. My name is Herms. You can follow me on Twitter at HermsNFL. I write here at Fantasy Six Pack. I also contribute some stuff over at Fantasy Pros. I have a weekly column over at Football Absurdity, and I am the producer of the Devy Royale podcast. So if you're interested in Devy, if you're interested just in college football in general, you can check that out. It is the Devy Royal with an E, Devy Royale. That's what I got. McLateral. How about you?
So, is it a Devy Royale with cheese though? That's what I'm curious about.
I'm not. I'm gonna have to add. I'll talk to Jeff Bell later. I'll see what he has to say. It could. I don't know, but his tolerance for lactose. So we'll see.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is I, your boy McLateral, aka McLateral FF on the Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at McLateral FF. You can also find me at Mac McMillan ATL, which is my main handle these days, where I talk about all the latest tech news, how much Arsenal's frustrating me, why McLaren has been a mistake for Daniel Ricciardo, all sorts of things, including like today, Apple just dropped a bunch of brand new stuff. Curious about it? Want to read about it? Go to Tom's Guide. That's what I do for my day job. I write about the latest tech news for them. One of the things I wrote about today, well, yesterday, for those of you now listening to it, is you want to get a free iPhone 14 Pro? Well, it looks like you'll be able to do that as long as you have certain phones. So go to Tom's Guide, check out that article. Be pretty cool. As far as fantasy football stuff goes, though, you can hear me on the Lateral Show as you are right now, or you can check out my article, The Heat Check, coming exclusively to Fantasy Six Pack. That is going to be the only writing I do fantasy-wise this season, and I, for one, am looking forward to it. I do believe that will be dropping every Friday this season, and I do believe there will be one coming this Friday, so stay tuned for that.
And I do believe we also saved the best for last. Mr. Justin Henry, please, if the people fell asleep at the beginning of the podcast or the beginning of the video and they're like, oh, whoa, who's this guy? Oh, I've never heard of this guy before, but he's wonderful. Where can I find him on the internet?
So you can find me, Justin Henry, with a 3 instead of an E on TikTok, Twitter, also with the Fantasy Gods, dropping content all the time. We do the Gods Cast every Tuesday, and Start Sit Show. Oh my God, I'm butchering the hell out of
honestly,
that.
though, I'm kind of here for that Start Shit Show. Like,
I mean, look, it's
I'm
a
curious.
clever
You
title.
have my attention, sir.
Sometimes it feels like that on there, but you can catch me Sunday mornings before the game, helping you guys with the start sit decisions that you need to win your leagues. And then also Monday through Friday, the Justin Henry Show at 3 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Also run a Saturday question and answer and a live show for Start and Sit there as well. So catch me all over the place, Justin Henry with 3 instead of an E. Follow me, you'll get it all.
And I could get down with that. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you.
And until next time, I mean, I think we really have to consider, because it's like either start them or else they're gonna shit the bed. I mean, that's one way. That's one way you can go with it. Or
I love it.
Like there's so many avenues. I mean, do you think we could get away with doing the start shit? Do you think Joe would be mad? Is that something?
I think we could get away with some speed metal.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Lateral Show. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go.